And welcome back. So you can see that we've got access to our tank back up here on the table. Now in the video that should post before this one, you'll see that we're continuing to do work on our vent tube. Now the video that you're going to see that again that will post before this one, there'll be a little bit later work on here because I'm kind of shooting this one a little bit out of order. So in case you look at the first one and go, hey, I see something here that isn't on this video, that's why. But since, if you remember when we dropped this tank, this is our vapor canister. Since it's at the top of this tank and a bear to gain access to, even if you were to leave this tank up in the vehicle, you still have to kind of drop this strap, this tank strap here, because it goes over this piece, and drop the heat shield here, or the shield, in order to get access to it. Since it's out, we have access to it, and just by looking at it and the age of it, it looks to be the original unit that came with the truck. Again, we're not condemning this because it's bad. We're just condemning this because we've got ease of access to it. So what you see down here is the replacement unit. Now this is an aftermarket unit. We got it from Rock Auto, mainly because the reason why we went aftermarket is that the cost of a factory unit is just borderline absurd, almost. So we're going to go with an aftermarket one. This was a favorite, according to Rock Auto, which means it had a heart symbol next to it, which, as I understand it, means a lot of individuals have bought this particular unit. So that's why we chose the one that we did. And I'll put a link to the actual part in the description. It'll have the manufacturer on it as well. But what we're going to work on first is getting this heat shield, or this shielding, off of here so we can get to figure out how the release clips work that are down inside on that corner and down inside on this corner. And then we'll work on getting these plumbing pieces off. We've got these two pieces here to detach, and of course this piece here, which is just a hose, that molded hose that fits over that big getting piece. Now, one thing I want to point out, and that I called this in a previous video, which was slightly incorrect. I called this a solenoid. What this is actually called in this version of truck and this canister is that they call this a leak detection pump, if I remember correctly. So I called it a solenoid. It's actually a leak detection pump. And let's see here. So what we need to do is get these little, looks to be pressed on rivets off of here. And it looks like we can just potentially manipulate some small screwdrivers underneath these little fingers, pry up on them a little bit, and we should be able to get these out. And it looks like it's got about 4 of them that just hold this shield on. I'm going to work on that, getting this shield off, and then I'll bring you back. Thank you much. Okay, so I'm working on getting these little press-on clips to get this heat shield off, and just like we theorized, and hopefully you can see that there, it looks like the best course I found, I'm trying to hold this camera without causing it to muffle, is if you just take a small bladed screwdriver, let's see if we can get in on this, and just kind of put it between 2 of these fingers and gingerly just kind of pry up to get some of the tension off. I'm finding that if you just take the tension off of all these fingers like this, again, I'm just kind of wedging underneath these fingers and prying up just a little bit, not much. Eventually, once you work your way around and get it semi-loose, then you can just kind of put your flat blade screwdriver in between 2 of those fingers and turn it. And then it will start to kind of walk itself off of that stud, as you can see there. And there we go. We've got a retainer. And that seems to be working out pretty well to get those off of there. Now to get these back on, since we spaced these out a little bit, we should just be able to kind of take our thumb or just place them on a flat surface, finger side up, and just ever so gently, not very hard, ever so gently, just kind of tap on these with something with a little bit of weight to them and kind of mush them a little bit flatter, not too much flat, but a little bit flatter than they are now, basically pushing those fingers back in. And then with a large size socket, we should then be able to just put that back on there and then push on it with a large size socket to get it back in place. So I'm going to work on getting this last clip off of here using the same method, and then I'll bring you back. Thank you much. And welcome back. So you can see we got our heat shield or shielding dropped at this point, and just in the process of removing the two connectors on this side. This first connector on this end is just, if you can see that there, it just has a spot on each side that you just squeeze in, and you may have to push inward on this connector a little bit just to get it to break its seal, but then keep it pushed in, push it inward a little bit, maybe give it a little bit of a twist, and that one should come out. Now for this one here, it's got one of these horseshoe type locking tabs like the fitting for the top of the fuel pump did. And I'm sure there's probably a special tool to do this, which I don't have. And I'm finding out what you can do is, hopefully you can see that there, just ever so slightly pry away. Take that little tab you see right there moving, pry it away, and at the same time that you pry it away, just kind of push downward on it. And that will, hopefully you can see that there, but it kind of gets it off of that lip and starts pushing it down. Now you may need to, hold your finger there to keep this from pushing back up, because when you do the same on this side, it'll try to push this one back up and relock it. So just kind of hold one finger there on that side to hold that one back, and do the same thing with the small screwdriver on this end, and then we should be able to push that tab out. And since I need both my hands, I'm going to go ahead and pause it, but I'll bring you back as I'm getting the rest of this clip out. Talk to you in a second. Okay, and welcome back. So you can see that we've got both our tabs on the side pushed out and then down, and you should be able to see our clip starting to work its way out of the bottom. Now, it's got a little bit of a catch there. You can get this to come all the way out, but you kind of have to fidget with it a little bit. But I believe just having it down that far should be enough for us to get this fitting off of here. I know on the fuel tank, to get the fitting off of the fuel pump, I actually had to manipulate this with a screwdriver a little bit to get that piece all the way out. But now that that's dropped down all the way, let's leave it in place and see if we can get this fitting out. So again, I'm just going to push this fitting in a little bit, pull it forward at the same time I'm twisting, and there we go. Okay, so we're out. So that's a good confirmation on that one, that you don't have to remove that piece all the way, that just having it pushed down that far is enough to unlock it. A little bit of a debris there. So we've undone that one, we've undone that connection, and obviously, one's bigger than the other one. You're not going to get them mixed up as far as when you go to put them back on. This is the electrical connector that we disconnected when we dropped the tank originally. And just like in the video, be careful when you're dropping this tank. Don't let it go completely down to the ground, because it will start to pull on this wire. You got a little bit of slack to play with when you go to drop the tank, but you don't have much, and you don't want to stress that connector out. This one should, since it's just a molded hose, allow us to rotate it and just kind of go ahead and pull this one off. There we go. Got to get it rotating just to kind of break its seal from being on for so many years. And there we go. It's off. Kind of like pulling a radiator hose, I guess. Basically, we'll just toss that on the ground for now. Now the next piece we need to look at is how are they configuring the locks on this, if anything. Now we can look at the original and kind of see how they're doing it. So if this is the new one and it goes in like this, so it looks like those mounting tabs just fit into these grooves. It doesn't look like it necessarily locks. And of course, I could have looked this up in all data, but you know what? I didn't. Okay, so let's see what we got here. Okay, let me fidget with this so you're not watching me for, eons on end trying to figure out how to get these clamps to come out of here. This unit may just push forward and come out, but let me fidget with this for a bit and then I'll bring you back. Hold on a minute. Okay, so I figured out how to get these clamps off, these retaining clamps. Wasn't a release or anything that I could see. What it is, I'll just tilt this forward. When we have this seated, and I'll show you back when we have it seated again, just a nice big, flat, beefy, flat blade screwdriver into the top front of this, and then you can kind of leverage it down ever so slightly, and you see how that clamp is moving. You're able to have enough play. Now, obviously don't go full strength on it because you don't want to break them, but you can push them out far enough and get them to tweak like that to where they release from the front. And then once they've released from the front, you can then just tilt it forward and then pull it towards you. Now you're going to have your two hoses clamped there in the back. So just take this hose and that hose out of its little holder before you completely move it forward. But as you can see there, these fittings or these slots here on the back of this canister just slide into here, and then it just rolls forward and then gets locked in place by these tabs here. So we're done with that. I'm going to take the opportunity while we have it, and I realize that a little bit of a futile effort. It's just going to get dirty again, but while we have the ability, I'm just going to get a little bit of glass cleaner and some shop towels and just kind of clean a little bit of this accumulated crud up. But yeah, that was all there was to it. You can see those slots a bit better now that the filter itself's out of the way. Again, just a nice beefy screwdriver. In case you're wondering, Craftsman, back when Craftsman was still made in the USA, I was hoping they would still print the number on here as to which one this one was. It looks like this one says 3/8. So 3/8 flat tip, nice and beefy. You can see it fits into that slot ever so nicely. And with that charcoal canister in place, again, you can kind of pry against it and get this to push out and then release. Again, just, don't put full leverage on it because you don't want to snap that plastic. But again, it's pretty straightforward to get that out. Obviously, once now we know. But I'm going to go ahead and get this cleaned up, and then I'll bring you back. Thank you much. And welcome back. I just had this sitting up there. You can see we kind of wiped the underside of it down where we had access to it. In case you're wondering what cleaner I use, I decided just to use some more of these Tubba Towels cleaning wipes. They do a really good job, actually, of even cleaning the surface up. And I just wiped over it with some dry shop towels to get any residual cleaner off of there. Okay, so just as we discussed, you'll see that tab there and that tab there on the replacement charcoal canister. They're just going to slide into that tab on that side and that tab on that side. So all we're going to do is line the tab up on that one. That one is in, that one is in. Okay, so we should be able to just roll this forward and get it to catch back into the clips on front. Yeah, looks like they've got a little bit of spring to them. We may have to roll down while at the same time we pick up on this clamp. Let's see if I can just pull this forward a little bit. There we go. Okay, so that one's in. You can kind of just do that by hand by the feel of it. We're going to do the same thing over here. There we go. A little bit of pull down, a little bit of push up. Okay, that's now locked back in. That's good. One thing I wanted to bring to your attention as well is that when I was looking at this part, I thought this was in the wrong orientation. And by that, if it shows in the previous clip, and I'll have to look, the one we took off, this piece was actually twisted upwards where it was pointing straight up and down, and that's the way I took it off of the vehicle. Now, I thought originally that this was incorrect, and then when I went to look at the original unit, I realized this piece had been twisted. It was actually broke and just kind of barely hanging there by the plastic. Now, I don't think it was broke on the truck originally. I think it got broke when we dropped the tank. If you remember, I made a comment earlier in this video that when you drop this tank, you only have a short pigtail of wire. And that was a fault on my part because I didn't realize, and I didn't look at my documentation close enough to realize there was besides the fuel pump connector, there is an additional electrical connector here. So when I lowered the tank a little bit, I saw it dangling down from the truck and disconnected it. And I made comment in the video that you have this other connector. But what I didn't realize that it potentially did was that this connector should be on like this. Because the tank got dropped and you don't have much slack on that wire, this connector actually got twisted. Looks like it got twisted up that way. So it's not on a very thick piece of plastic, and those terminals aren't very beefy. And that's why I would make a comment earlier, you want to be careful with this connector, because I think when we dropped it, since it was still attached to the truck, it actually just took the connector on the old one and bent it up this way and broke it. And like I said, I just now noticed that because I thought maybe this was in the wrong orientation, and it wasn't. It's just that this was twisted on the old part and broken. So it's actually a good thing we ordered a new canister. Now you can get this pump by itself, and there actually is a little lock tab here on the bottom that you can push in, and this will actually rotate off as a complete assembly. So it wouldn't have been bad. We would have just had to order a pump. But like I said, it's actually a good thing we went ahead and just replaced the canister, because when you order the canister, you get pump and all. So to show you that here, you see that little tab right there on the bottom. You can actually just push that tab, and hopefully I can do this. I don't think I can do this one-handed because you got to have, there we go. Yeah. Hold on a second. There's going to be a bad camera angle. I'm just going to start taking this off, and then I'll bring you back. Yeah, it's a bit of a pain, but it's hard to do this one-handed. But you can see that tab there. You can push down on this tab and actually just turn that assembly and take just the pump unit off of the vapor canister. But anyway, that's broken, or at least the pump's broken, and unfortunately I broke it when I took it off for not paying attention. So what we're going to do is go ahead and get our lines reattached, and we'll proceed on with the next piece here. So just kind of in the order that we took them off, this smaller black one, which comes off to this piece, which has the connector that is on the frame of the truck that goes to your purge solenoid, which is in the engine compartment. But that line comes over here. Should just be able to push this on. Hear it click. There we go. We're nice and seated on that connector now. Now, I know that some people would probably dig the O-rings out if they're replaceable on these and replace the O-rings. I have an O-ring kit, but I don't think I have O-rings big enough to do that. And like I said, these haven't been off of the truck. They don't look brittle or cracked. So I'm just going to reuse what's there, to be honest with you. This one, I got to kind of stretch this out a little bit to get this over here. And then kind of pull it a little bit to straighten it out, but same process. We're going to go ahead and set this on. Now it's seated. Now this one, it's not going to click because it's got that locking tab that we took off earlier. So with it fully seated, should just be able to reach underneath here. Push this lock tab back in the position. There it is. You can see that the two ends of that tab clipped back into that piece. And there we go. We've got that one locked back in. And as for this piece, this is just a hose fitting that we took off earlier, which we know the end of that hose will go into that pump. Now, I don't want to put that one on right now. We'll save that for when we put the tank back in the truck, because it's got this nice cap on it to keep contaminants out of here. So since I don't need that until we go to mount it, I'll save that for later. But what I want to do is go ahead and finish cleaning the back of this up. I'm going to clean the back of that shield up. Yeah, I know it's a futile effort. No one will ever see it, and it'll just get dirty again, but at least I'll know it's clean. And then I'll put this shield back on. Once we get that done, the last thing that we'll do to this tank is that we'll go ahead and get our fuel pump mounted. So when we're done, we should be able, when we get that completed, we'll have this tank to the point that it should be ready just to put straight back into the truck at this point. But I'm gonna go ahead and clean this up, and then I'll bring it back. Thank you much. And welcome back. So just to show you that I did wipe down the back side of that and the front side of this. Actually, the tank mounting side actually didn't look too bad on this piece of metal, except for maybe that little piece down there, which that's actually just kind of oil stains. But I did clean the back side of that. I got a 15mm deep well that I'm going to use to attempt to try to push these in place. As for the little spring clips themselves, or little star clips, whatever you want to call them, I just took and manually pushed the little fingers back in just ever so slightly to kind of flatten them out a little bit. I'm going to see if that'll be enough to get them to re-adhere. But I'm going to go ahead and pause the camera, put you down. I'm going to at least get one of these in, and I'll bring you back and show you the other ones. Talk to you in a bit. And welcome back. So that seems to work pretty well. Got the first one pressed back in. Again, this is the 15mm deep well. As you can see, it does a pretty good job of fitting the center of these connectors. So what I've been doing, and what I did on the first one, I'm going to attempt to do this here again. Put these down here so I don't lose them, is starting it by kind of the same way we took it off, and just giving it a little bit of pressure. And it's kind of hard to do because the tank's wanting to move on me, and trying to do this one-handed and hold the camera at the same time, bit of a pain. Basically turn it a little bit to kind of get it locked back in, or get it started on that little mounting nub, and then you can take your 15mm socket right in the center and then just push on it. And what I'm going to do here, and you're going to go upside down a little bit, sorry, this is the way I have to grab the tank and hold the camera. There we go. So you can see we're able to push that on by hand. So then you just take your 15mm socket, and conveniently this fuel tank has a little grab handle that I can grab a hold of and kind of pull the tank my direction to keep it from pushing away, but then just take the socket and finish pushing it on, driving it home, and there you go. You got your clip reseated. Now, you know, if that's not enough, if that doesn't give you enough pressure, or you don't feel it's enough pressure, then you can just kind of take your clips and flatten them out a bit more, so it forces it to grab a bit more onto those studs. I'm sure you can probably order new clips of these and just use new ones, but the old ones seem to be able to hold on to the shield just fine. So I'm going to get the rest of these installed, and then I'll bring you back. Thank you much. And welcome back. So we've got our new fuel pump here, which is a Delphi unit. It's not an OEM unit. The cost of the OEM unit was somewhere around the insane level. And I know for certain items I do prefer OEM, but like I said, this Delphi, from my understanding, makes some pretty quality aftermarket parts. It was also a Rock Auto favorited part, meaning it had the heart symbol next to it, which, as I understand it, means a lot of people order it. So it seems to be a pretty good unit. Came with a couple of pamphlets in the box. One says failure to clean your fuel tank may void your warranty, which don't worry about that. As you've seen from the previous videos, we have definitely cleaned the inside of that tank. And more information on the pump itself, letting you know that they have improved upon the OEM version of it with some of their own patented technology. And it's kind of a heads up to let you know that it does say the fuel pump may look different. And if you compare this with what you saw on the fuel pump in the last video, she looks quite a bit different than the one that was in there. Like, one thing I noticed is you got an extra module here, and you got your actual fuel pump here. I'm thinking this might be some kind of a filter, because it comes out of the fuel pump, hits this device, then comes up to the outlet for the actual fuel itself, where the truck will connect into. So it could be that this is the filter of some type. Not exactly sure. I could be wrong about that. But you'll notice the old one, when we looked at it, had a much more open cup that fuel could spill into. So it definitely looks a scooch different, I should say, than the factory one. It did come with a new float arm, which we need to attach. And from the looks of things, it looks like the arm just slides into that little spot there, and then will clip in place on that little arm next to it. And we've got our lock ring install tool out and our 1/2-inch breaker bar to work that lock ring. As we mentioned earlier, I did buy an aftermarket ring. This is the factory one. You'll notice it's a lot beefier and a lot thicker, and it's still in perfectly good condition, so we're going to use the factory one. I did buy an aftermarket one. This is put out by Spectre, but you can see how much thinner that aftermarket lock ring is. Again, not saying that this wouldn't do the job. I'm sure it would do the job just fine. But you compare that with the factory lock ring, and you'll notice that you got a much bigger lip, and it's much beefier piece of metal just by the weight alone. The fuel pump also came with a new gasket, as with most do. Nice, thick, malleable, circular or ring type gasket. And we did go through and clean the mating surface out that this gasket sits into. Again, just use a little bit of tub of towels and then follow it up with a clean shop towel just to get out any residual residue. So that's going to sit in there like that. And on the back of that pump, you'll see that locator tab there. You notice there's only one. And if you look on top of the tank, you'll see that this is marked locator. So that tab for the back of that pump is going to sit right here between these two marks. So what that's going to do, that's going to orient the pump so it's in the right position. So when we raise this back into the truck, it's where it needs to be in order to get that fuel line to plug in and then route the correct direction so we can make the tie-in to the frame rail. Or I should say to the steel fuel line that's on the frame rail that then runs up into the engine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get that float installed on there. We're going to get the pump down in here, and then I'll bring you back when we're ready to put this lock ring in. It's going to be the opposite of removal. We're going to put the tool on there, and then we're going to turn it until these tabs in this tank hit the end of our locks here. So I'll bring it back in a bit. I thought you might want to see this getting a little low on camera battery, but we should have enough. So you can see where that float arm locks in, just goes into the center of here, and it's got some little fingers, little tabs that you push that rod into, it locks it in place. So I'm going to put this down so I can get a better hold of this pump here. So when I put this pump in, I'm going to start by angling a little bit to get that float in there, because I don't want to bend that float arm, because what that'll do is play with the gas gauge and give you an incorrect reading. I'll slowly set this down in here and then start to get our locator tab where it needs to be. Now those arms are spring loaded, those little rails that you saw earlier on the pump. Once we get this tab where it needs to be, we can then just kind of push down on it, as you see there, and then we'll put our lock ring in place and lock it in. And I'm going to have to shut the camera off and put you down to get that lock ring, but I'll bring you back in a bit. So as promised, we've got our lock ring partially engaged here, just so it kind of holds it in place. We've got our tab in between our locator marks where we need it. Now you might have to fidget with this lock ring and kind of put it on at an angle a little bit, because you do have to get it around your fuel line connector as well as your electrical connector. But eventually you'll get it to line up and seat, and it'll kind of, come over these fingers that you see here and allow you to set it in place. And again, just partially turn it enough to kind of hold it there. And the next thing we'll do is that we'll get our lock ring tool installed here. And then what we can do next is we'll put a breaker bar on it, give it a little bit of a turn again until these tabs reach the end of their travel, and that'll lock that ring in place. Again, it'll compress it, and it'll compress it against that green gasket that you saw us put on earlier. With that being said, we'll get this locked down and I'm going to bring you back. So we're locked in place. You can see our other tank tabs are locked at the end of that lock ring. Again, this tool just uses a 1/2 inch breaker bar, or a 1/2 inch ratchet if you want to do it that. It's easier to turn this with a breaker bar. Just make sure that when you're turning this, however, that when you line up on enough of these points that you're not going to run into this either when you take off or put on that lock ring, because you don't want to, obviously you don't want to snap that piece off of a new pump. Now this one, you'll see that little raised piece on here. This one, when it got into position, it made a pretty solid thud of a click as that little raised piece in that lock ring cleared these little indentation pieces here. And so that's a pretty good indication that we're at our stopping point that we need to be. So with that being said, on this video, we covered remove and replace the vapor canister. We've got our new fuel pump installed with the float and the new seal. Got everything locked down. So at this point, we are ready to reinstall this tank, make all our connections, put some fresh fuel in it, and you know, we'll fuel test it. We'll put a fuel pressure gauge back on it up at the fuel rail, and we'll see if it at least helped us out with our fuel pressure issue, and then we'll see if it helps us out with our crank and run issue. But with that being said, I will let you go, and I'll see you back when we go to reinstall this tank. Thank you much.